Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of Strategy, Finance and Policy. Can I first draw everyone's attention to page 3 within the agenda, which sets out details regarding fire safety instructions and the webcasting arrangements. For those without an agenda, in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the nearest exit and make your way to the assembly point located in Market Car Park, adjacent to the Civic Suite building. Please do not return to the building unless given permission by council staff. And for the benefit of those watching from home and those in the public gallery, members of the committee are seated in the front row, so they are the members that can vote on the items this evening. Visiting members are sat in the back row, so they're here in an observatory or a commentary position only. Okay, item 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Councillor Gary Myers, Deborah Squires-Coleman, Lisa Newport and Michael Hoy. We have substitute members, Councillor Eves for Councillor Squires-Coleman, Councillor Williams for Councillor Myers and Councillor Goodin for Councillor Lisa Newport. Item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of February 2026. Are they agreed, members? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? Okay, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, in regards to chairman of the 1476 Air Cadets in Rayleigh, because we do receive grants.
And Councillor Arthur Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda items 10 and 13, I believe, as a member of Rochford Parish Council, and may have an interest.
Thank you very much. Public questions on notice is agenda item 4. None have been received. So item 5, amendment to the existing policy for the granting of discretionary non-domestic rate relief, and the report begins on page 13. I'm going to open straight up to questions. This is a policy position, so I'll open it up to members if there are any questions. Councillor Newport.
Sorry, Chairman. Is the officer not going to introduce the report? I think in light of the public here who may not have agendas, they wouldn't know what we're discussing at all.
I'm more than happy to the officer to introduce it if you feel necessary.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the capital and investment strategy. So it's for 2026 to 27. It covers all the treasury. So the capital. Oh, sorry. That's not my one.
The report is of Pam Shepherd, and it's just the amendment to the existing policy for the granting of the discretionary non-domestic rate relief. So there's nothing more to add than what's in the report, but if any officer did want to, then I'm more than happy. Pam, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. No, it's literally just to add amendments to an existing policy, and the amendments reflect changes to legislation which are effective from the 1st of April 2026.
Thank you very much. So, members, Councillor Ian Ward.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. It's my understanding it's statutory by the government and there's no changes that could be made. This is just purely an amendment coming from the government that we have to follow.
Thank you. Councillor James Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to check with officers about the funding that the government says we will get in full via a Section 31 grant. Is that an absolute definite? Because we know that the government has rolled back on previous promises to us, such as national insurance, etc.
If I can respond to that, Chair. Yes, it has been confirmed that all these changes will be funded in full via a Section 31 grant. Has been confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to move the recommendation on page 13, which is to approve the amendments to the existing policy attached as Appendix A for the granting of discretionary non-domestic rate relief. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vilma Wilson. All those members in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 6. This is the capital and investment strategy of 26-27. So the report starts on page 69. And I believe, David, did you want to add anything to the report?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start again. So the purpose of this report is it provides a statutory framework for the capital programme, treasury management and investments. So the capital programme was already agreed as part of the budget in February. The capital investment strategy would normally come at the same time, but because there were some discussions and we hadn't agreed on using internal borrowing to fund some of the leisure centres, that we decided to postpone that till this meeting, and then it will go on to council for full agreement next week. Happy to take questions.
So for the purpose of this report, the recommendation is that the committee endorses the capital and investment strategy for 26-27. So the strategy is in front of you. So I'll open it up to any further questions from members or comments. Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, just a quick question for David, please, Chair. There's a bit in it that says we can no longer invest purely in debt for yield commercial assets. I just wondered why we can't. I'm happy to take that.
There are quite a few examples: the Thurex, the Woking, it's all off the back of that. So a lot of the councils in the 2010s, 2020s started investing in commercial and debt and borrowing to get yield. And some of them worked quite well, some of them didn't, and the government's tightened that. So you can't borrow, especially from Public Works Loan Board, which is where most councils borrow from. You can't borrow there and then invest it for a yield. Investing in your own assets is fine, but to invest, some councils were buying assets in outside of the borough and being quite speculative in some of those investments.
So just to be clear, we've never done that then?
So Rochford has never borrowed, so it wouldn't do that by the approach.
Okay, I'm just clearing up. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. The Section 151 officer is given day-to-day decision-making authority within the parameters of that strategy. What are the outer limits of the delegated authority, and what would require a return to committee or full council during the year?
So anything so the restrictions are within the document. So it will be, say, 5 million exposure to one counterparty for lending to a local authority, say. So if I wanted to go to 6 million, then it would need to come back to council. We couldn't go outside of that. There are other perimeters, but because there's no borrowing, so if I wanted to go out to borrow, I would need to come back to council. But outside of that, it's a fairly simple strategy that we keep, and we just keep within those in the limits that are in the report. So anything outside of that, I'll need to come back. But there's sufficient flexibility within those to manage the treasury strategy.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions, I would like to move the motion on page 70 that the committee endorses the capital and investment strategy for 26-27. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vilma Wilson. All those members in favour? Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Moving on to item 7. So this is the core and discretionary funding. So this report starts on page 131, and it follows on from the budget setting that took place last month in regards to some of the community projects that we want to specify and some of the way that grants can be carried forward in the future. So all the details are in there. We have 3 recommendations, although they are labelled, I've noticed, recommendation 1 and then recommendation 2, but that obviously should read 3, and that is on page 132. So in summary, we are looking 130,000 pot will be allocated as follows. So this is from within the budget that we've already agreed. So £30,000 of additional funding is allocated to support third sector grant applications via RAVs. This also includes Volunteer Week in 26-27 as well as core funding. This will mean that for 26-27, RAVs will receive a total of £49,500 of grant funding for the work they do for the voluntary sector across the entire district. Mega Centre to receive £10,000 to be allocated to deliver young people's outreach programme. £15,000 for bar and bus to provide youth support in agreed schools in the Rochford area. This will enable current delivery to be extended into King Edmund School and Greenswald, as well as deepen the current work being delivered in Fitzwymark and Swain schools, and will work alongside the wider community and detached work across the district. The Rochford Community Fund, it's proposed that an additional £15,000 is allocated to the fund, which will provide a total fund of £25,000 for 26-27, and this will enable grants of up to £5,000 subject to member agreement, and then the fund would be launched on the 1st of April and close on the 31st of July. This is similar to grant funding that we've done in the past. Revive Community Supermarket, it is proposed that we allocate £10,000 to the community supermarket to enable expansion into Rayleigh, to provide further support to residents in the district. The Youth Summit, following the success of the Rochford Youth Summit held in January, it's proposed to allocate £10,000 to support the priority outcomes identified into 26-27, and that report be brought back to the Community Wellbeing and Housing Committee in the new municipal year with the details of the Youth Summit Action Plan. And then finally, the Achieve, Thrive, Flourish, so ATF, it's proposed we allocate £20,000 to provide capital funding to support improvements to the tennis courts and £20,000 to support activity for young people in Great Wakering. Again, that project was agreed as part of full council at the budget, but it was specific for Great Wakering. We're now wanting to allocate it to the charity that have been identified to deliver the works. So a lot of projects there. Very much I'd like to thank Paul Brace and Mike Webb for the work that they have done together, reaching out to all of the community groups to identify the direct need in the district and to ensure that funding reaches the entire area that the district covers, because sometimes it can feel that it's all going in one direction, but there's a lot of work here being done to achieve this. So all good news, I think, but I will open it up to members to discuss and debate. So I've got Councillor Williams, then Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I better just declare an interest in the fact that I'm a trustee of RAVs. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that noted? Yep.
Similarly, my wife is one of the organisers for the Revive Community Supermarket, so I need to declare an interest in that. Thank you.
Okay, so declarations noted. Members, any questions, comments on the report? Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. I don't know who I'm addressing them to. So do they want them all at once or one by one? Okay. So the first item to note is on page 134. There's a typo which says £20 rather than 20,000. So I think the report needs correcting. The second question is on page 133. It states that grant agreements will be prepared subject to member approval. When will those agreements be finalised, and what happens if an organisation is unable to agree on the terms? And my next question is, the risk section acknowledges that the reduced funding could significantly reduce the support organisations provide to residents, but what is the monitoring that's in place to act if a funded organisation underperforms or faces any financial difficulties mid-year? Thank you.
Thank you. So in regards to the typo, we could amend that. It doesn't affect the detail of the report because the total column is correct, but that is noted. In regards to member decisions, are you talking about on page 132 and 133 regarding the Rochford Community Fund, that specific part?
That's on a separate page, so I can't refer, but it was page 133, paragraph 1.4. It says grant agreements will be prepared subject to member approval.
Okay, well, we're looking for the approval this evening, but if I pass over to Paul for some of the specifics and on how we measure the outcomes, because it's absolutely important that we do measure those.
Thank you, Councillor. We have a standard template now, which was introduced last year, that sits alongside some performance indicators that we would expect everybody receiving the grant, the list here, will get. So it's a standard template, and then we talk to the groups around the outcomes that they've said they can deliver from getting this money, and we build KPIs around that. That's not the only time, obviously, we speak to those groups. We speak to them through the year if they need any assistance or more support, if things are going wrong in general. And certainly some of those people give us an annual report, so that's reported to committee. So we will be reporting the outcome of all these activities to a future committee of community, the community committee. So we do assist throughout the year, but we do know also things do change, which means we can change with member agreement what the funding is being used for if the need is not there anymore. But we do support the groups through it.
Sorry, just to be clear, so the reporting goes to quarterly committee, is that right? On the KPI, you said there's KPIs. Is that monitored via the communities committee quarterly, biannually? Sorry, can you just tell me how often that's reported?
We would normally do it annually, but now we've got a full-time grant officer. I would suggest we'll probably do that 6 monthly.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Councillor Whittam.
Thank you, Chairman. At a time when local government is facing all sorts of financial constraints, would you agree with me that for Rochford District Council to be able to afford £130,000 to distribute fairly across from the extreme east to the extreme west of this district, very fairly to these tremendous groups, is a fantastic achievement at a time when other councils can't really afford to do this sort of thing?
Yes. Quite simply, it is a fantastic piece of work that's been done. It's fantastic news. I know a number of us are engaged with these groups throughout the year and recognise the brilliant work that they do, and it's why that we often get unanimous support when looking after them, and the fact that we're able to do more this year, or as we come into the next year, at a time of uncertainty, because the community and voluntary sector is under a lot of strain with funding being cut from other areas. So it gives me great pleasure that we as a council are able to offer this. So yes, thank you. Any other members wishing to speak to this item? Yeah.
One of the benefits of giving this money to our community groups is we've been able to assist ATF to attract an additional £25,000 worth of support funding. So without us investing, the work they wanted to do may not have happened.
Thank you, Paul. It's good news. Providing we get it through tonight, presumably, but I'm sure we will. Okay, now in the interest, I'm no monitoring officer, but given the conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest, I'm going to suggest that Councillor Arthur Williams and Councillor Adrian Eves don't vote on the item, just because I'm sure no one in the room would have a problem, but just in case there was any perceived, I wouldn't want to jeopardise the position. Yeah. So if members are happy with that, Councillor Eves, Councillor Williams, I'm looking to you. Are you happy to? Yeah. So just is that okay with you from a corporate position? Greg, are you happy with that? I think it just makes sense in case there's challenge further down the line. Okay, so if there are no more questions or comments, I am going to move the recommendations as set out on page 132. Recommendation 1, the committee approves the allocation of core and discretionary funding as set out in the report. Recommendation 2, the committee approves the increase in grant limits for the Rochford Community Fund from 2,000 to 5,000. And recommendation 3, subject to agreement of R1 by the committee, the 2026 Rochford Community Fund is launched on the 1st of April 26. So my first question is, are we happy to take those on block? Yes. Agreed? Brilliant. Okay, so I would like to propose those. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. All those members in favour? Okay, thank you, members. Okay. Moving on to item 8, This is the Renters' Right Act 2025. This is a statutory piece of work that has come forward from government and has to be done at pace. It's a big report. I'm going to hand over to Paul Brace. He will be the one answering questions, no doubt, because this is a technical piece of work. So I will open up the floor to questions or comments.
Thank you. The report sets out the statutory requirements that we need to have in place by the 1st of May 2026. It is a very large piece of work, and we are still working on vast elements of it in terms of the implementation. But the first two bits that we need to get through are the policy for enforcement and the civil penalties policy. Once we get those through, we'll be working right up until the 1st of May to sort out the fees and charges, and we'll also be looking at staffing levels, etc. The service to enforce is not funded by government. It needs to be funded by those penalties, so you cannot make a profit. So we are working through a number of benchmarks to see what level of service we'll need to provide. We know we have around about 3,000 private homes in Rochford. So this is the first stage. What I'm suggesting is that we would come back to the relevant committee in 6 months once we've been running to make sure the charges are right and the policy is working. But this will improve private housing in Rochford and across the country and give people protection within those properties. So that can only be a good thing. There will be an ombudsman for private sector housing, and we will be working with them as there are issues with particular landlords. The one thing that this policy and our enforcement will be in line with is ensuring that we keep as many landlords as possible continuing to rent their properties. The last thing we want them to do is pull their properties from the market as a rented property, because then we will have a number potentially of homeless people that will be turning up at our doors. So I will happily take any questions, technical or otherwise, but thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So I have Councillor Ian Wald.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if it's in the report, I may have missed it, but is there any initial funding that the council is putting forward as basically priming the pump before you get any money in from fines and such like?
We have had something that's called New Burdens funding. You would have heard, I can't remember the exact figures, but we've got enough money to get ourselves going, but very quickly that money will run out. So, but there is introducing a licence fee for each landlord for a property, which we haven't set that yet. We're waiting for more guidance from government, but that should technically be able to cover the basic costs of a service each year. So there's lots of bits that we still haven't got the information for, but no, they're not providing funding to fund it from day one. We've got to work that out ourselves.
Thank you. Just for those that are interested, it's on page 1491.16. So we were awarded 14,000, which is considered to be insufficient, as Paul's just set out. And there's been a further allocation of 28,000 for 26-27. But it is a new burden and it is a stretch. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions on this one, which actually Councillor Ward's asked the first part about the funding, which I know was 14,000. But how large is the funding gap and how is that going to be bridged? The second question will be around, I do have concerns about, on page 149 to 150, about the financial penalty matrix not being set because we don't have the data. But it also says about delegated authority is therefore proposed to set those interim fees. For me, that's not accountability as members. So I would propose, Chairman, and I hope you agree, that yes, delegated authority can be with the officer, but also in consultation with the chair of committee, that that comes under, because I am concerned about the backlash on that. Also, my other question would be, in the risk section on 152, it warns that landlords may serve Section 21 notices before the abolition date to exit the market, which could increase the homeless pressure. What early engagement is planned with landlords in our district to mitigate this? And is there a current homelessness demand forecast that accounts for that risk? And the other question, which is the bane of our life in local government, is around the national shortage of qualified housing enforcement officers. Do we have sufficient staff for this, and what would the pressure be financially on us?
Okay, thank you. I'll hand over to Paul, but just on the point about delegated authority, recommendation 2 actually it's granted to the Strategic Director for Finance 151 in consultation with the Director of Communities. Is that okay? Yeah. Paul, did you want to ask the other questions? I know some of them are not quite there yet, but
how large is the gap? We're working through what we will need to run the service. At this moment in time, we think it's 3,000 properties. We don't know the condition of those properties. We don't know the status of those tenancies of those properties. So it's very difficult to work that out. So we've got to work through that with some national benchmarking that we're looking at. In terms of enforcement officers, yes, that is a risk. We are talking to government about that and raising concerns of what we're going to do to fill that gap. And we look like we are on other things now, which I'm doing with licensing, is to grow our own. So we've got some experienced officers across Brentwood and Rochford that could support some people coming into the industry. I've missed your third question, Councillor, sorry.
Yeah, it was about basically the Section 21 notices and what engagement is planned with landlords in Rochford to mitigate them exiting.
So for the last month and a half or so, the website is up live for landlords on Rochford Council to give them support. We are about to set up a landlords forum once the policies are agreed, that we can start talking to landlords and inviting them in. The website will be expanding considerably, and there will be a lot more social media posting to attract landlords to come and talk to us. So the idea is that we will support them through the process.
And sorry, on the end of my question, on that question, was about, is there a current homelessness demand forecast for that risk of exiting?
It's as good as the forecast have got of how good are those properties and what tenancies have they got. It's an unknown figure. We may have 3,000 people that are in private accommodation that are very happy and it's good properties, in which case it won't be a problem. So it's a bit of an unknown, but it's on the risk. I can tell you it is in the risk profile, and myself and Lauren are working very closely on how we might mitigate that. The idea is that we're not going to be able to home 3,000 families potentially coming out of homes, so we will be working hard with landlords to ensure that we can retain those housing private rent.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you. Quite a few of the questions have been asked already, but just a couple more to add on, if you don't mind. There's obviously going to be a risk that landlords are going to be put off by any kind of red tape, let's say licences and such like, that are going to come in, which they're going to have to pay for, which I am familiar with in some parts of London, the boroughs, where you have a licence and then you'll get inspected to ensure your property is up to the standards that are required. I take it this is exactly the same format that's going to occur in Rochford with this statutory bit of machinery coming through. And will we have enough officers who are going to be there to actually inspect properties if that is what is going to need it?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion around the bit around enforcement. So currently we have the responsibility to visit, when required, private rented to inspect and enforce. So that's there today. That's not changed. This means that every property will have a licence. Sorry. Turn my phone every property will have to have a licence. That doesn't mean we're going to go and inspect and check all the time, but it does mean that they will be checked at some point, but we don't go after them with a stick. So there is a bit of a difference. London has what's called selective licence schemes, which tend to be in densely populated areas. We couldn't have one of those in Rochford or in Brentwood. So the selective ones are a way of generating income for a local authority, which is a lot more stringent on poorer quality housing in densely populated areas. So that's slightly different than we'll have in Rochford. So the idea is that we're not looking at it as an income generating service that is going to go around and punish every landlord in the district. It is about making sure those houses are fit and right and proper for tenants to live in.
Okay, well, Councillor Williams, then Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Through the chair, Paul, will there be extra support for residents or for tenants with the possibility of a Section 21 being issued?
We do all we can to support that. We do liaise with landlords now if that happens. As I say, we want to get to landlords early because I would imagine there'll be some scary stories, and I think the council's already raised around some of the selective licensing schemes, which can be seen as a money grabber, whereas this is not designed to be that. So that's why we want to work with landlords very quickly, because that's the easiest way not to make them walk away on Server Section 21.
Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Williams' question, actually, mine is focused on the people who are renting. We're talking about working with landlords, but what about the people who are renting? What I mean by that is, if a landlord evicts someone incorrectly, and people who are renting want to appeal it, presumably they have to know about this in the first place, and they have to know that the changes to their rental agreements and their rights. So are we doing anything to make sure that people who are renting understand the changes in their circumstances?
I don't know where they are. So if I know who the tenants are, if I know where the landlords are, I can then find out where the tenants are. So yes, there will be some general communication about tenants in. But I would obviously write to them directly, but I don't know at this stage. We know where some of them are, obviously, but I don't know where all of them are.
Yeah, that's fine. Come back.
So just quickly then, could we not think about putting out some comms? Yeah, like just generally, just to let everyone know where possible.
I think on the back of the policy being agreed, hopefully tonight, and the civil penalties policy, then we'll be doing a lot more drip feeding of information, because the one thing I don't want to do is lock the phones up with loads of people asking questions we haven't got the answers to yet. So, but we will be getting there.
So you wanted to come back one more time, Councillor Ward?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. It's just on that same point. I'm sure that if people suddenly realise, or landlords realise, they have to have a licence, they will be contacting you, so you will be flushing out, so to speak, all the landlords that are in the district, because they will not be wanting to fall foul of something they're not aware of.
Yeah, of course.
And the government have also, for those that have read a very long report, and I do apologise for that, members, but on the civil penalties, there is only a range we can serve a penalty on. So there's a minimum and a maximum. So we can't just charge what we want. So the more significant, like a Section 21, is a hefty bill for a landlord to do. It's a deterrent.
Thank you, members. So some good questions there, and thank you, Paul, for answering them all. I think it's important to remember, I think that the concept behind this new bill is very much about improving standards of living for privately rented tenants. So I think that the whole ethos of it is good. There's going to definitely be some teething problems. We almost certainly are going to see some landlords leave the market, and we need to be alive to that, and I think we are. We've got a fantastic housing team here that deal with those issues and those communications. And as councillors, we will have a responsibility to communicate some of this and ensure that the tenants within our own wards and the landlords within our own wards are aware. But this is step one of enabling the next phase of work in time for the deadline. So if there are no more questions or comments, I would like to move the 3 recommendations as set out on page 146. Recommendation 1, to recommend the housing enforcement policy and civil penalties policy to Council for approval as detailed in this report. Recommendation 2, that delegated authority is granted to the Strategic Director for Finance, our Section 151 officer, in consultation with the Director of Communities and Health and the Chairman of Communities, Wellbeing and Housing Committee, that's a mouthful, to agree an interim set of fees and charges for the civil penalties policy. And recommendation 3, to review charges and performance of the civil penalties policy after 6 months of operation and report back to the relevant committee. Are members happy for me to take those on block? Yeah. Okay, all those, can I have a seconder first? Councillor Wilson. All those members in favour? Thank you, members. That is unanimous. Okay, we move on to agenda item 9. This is the Asset Management Strategy, Action Plan and Property Update, so a standing item. The report has been prepared by Phoebe Barnes. We have one recommendation. Phoebe, would you like to add anything, or Andy, would you like to add anything? Was Phoebe taking your credit on the report? I thought so.
I couldn't possibly go in. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So this report for noting is it updates members on the action plan related to the asset management strategy and framework, which was previously approved by committee in June 2025. Appendix A provides the update on the actions, on the priority actions, which were broken down into 3 6-month time periods, and there are actions related to each of those periods. The action plan, just to remind members, was designed to look at the asset management service and also the assets themselves. So it was a combination of improvements to the service as well as looking at the portfolio of assets, and there are various actions related to that. Members note that there's been progress in all areas delivered alongside the other projects that the team's been involved in, not least the community asset transfer process, which there was a report later on the agenda. And happy to take any comments from members regarding the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Steptoe as a visiting member indicating, so I'll come to Councillor Mike Steptoe first and then to other members.
Thank you, Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions for clarification, please. There's quite an extensive list there of those that have expressed an interest. Is that the final list, or is it still open?
You've jumped ahead. We're on item 9, which is just the strategy at the moment. The action plan will be coming to agenda item 10 shortly. But now we're prepared for your question. Thank you.
I did have another part to it, but I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Williams, did you want to come in on this report?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've jumped ahead as well. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on agenda item 9? Councillor Newport.
Yeah, just the one, Chairman. The sale of South Street says awaiting completion. Is there any indication of the timescale of that, please?
So there were 2 disposals. Number 19 has completed, and we're just awaiting on the exchange for number 3 to 15. Oh, sorry. There were 2 disposals that were agreed. Number 19 has exchange and completed, and we're just waiting for exchange on, or the confirmation for exchange on 3 to 15, but that's due imminently.
Thank you. And as soon as those are fully done and dusted, they'll come out in the members' update so that everybody's aware of the specifics. Okay, any other questions or comments on item 9? If not, this report is just for noting. Is that noted? Noted. Okay, thank you. Okay, agenda item 10. So agenda item 10 is the community asset transfer expressions of interest update. So again, this is another standing report on every one of these meetings so that we can see any progression or any other expressions that have been interests. I won't steal Councillor Steptoe's thunder. I'll let him ask his question in full and then I'll come to members if that's okay. So Councillor Steptoe.
Thank you, Chairman. Question two parts to the question. One is that it's quite an extensive list there of people who've expressed interest. Is that the final list, or is it still open for others to actually express interest in other assets? And secondly, with LGR around the corner, have officers looked at other areas in the country where government have brought in LGR as to what they do in the potential of locking down assets once the LGR process starts?
Thank you. So this is the list as of today. People are still sending through expressions of interest. There's no cut-off point. Parishes certainly have been provided with lists of all the assets that we have in the district at the quarterly meetings that we have. And we've invited, I'm going to get the EALC, the EALC to the next meeting of the parishes, who are going to be talking about some of their experience with these community asset transfers. And we've been taking learnings throughout the year, and I know officers have been having those conversations as well. I'll hand over to Phoebe and Andy in case they want to add anything, but we certainly haven't closed the doors. It's an open piece of work.
Yeah, no, that is correct. It is a ongoing piece of work. Just a couple of clarifications I'd just like to bring to the committee's attention from the appendix list of items. So item 13 refers to the play area at Hawkwell Common for the Hawkwell Parish Council. That also includes the common itself. And item 13 refers to Magnolia Playing Fields, but also actually refers to the land adjacent to Magnolia Playing Fields, west of Reynolds Garden. So I just wanted to make those clarifications, and obviously those clarifications will appear in the minutes too. So I did have something prepared to talk people through. If you want me to continue with that,
it's up to you.
Or I can just answer the specific questions. That might be easier because they
my thought process was, because this has been a standing item, we've sort of given the flavour of what this report is. If anyone has any specific questions, then of course we're happy to answer them. But I don't think you need to explain the report each quarter unless there's people need it. I'll bring Councillor Steptoe back in before I come to members.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's really around the point of the local government reform. When the government does announce that, are they likely to lock down our power to actually be able to disseminate the assets amongst the parishes, etc., going forward?
We will certainly have until the structural change order comes in, which is expected on the timeline that we're being given to be around September. I think it's still looking at September, October. So we should hear the Minded 2 decision next week, which is the decision that government are taking. We should hear it. I can't commit to that, but we should hear the Minded 2 decision, which is the outcome that they're looking at, so the business case that they're choosing. That will then go through another process before becoming confirmed, for want of a better phrase. But the structural change order was the document that we agreed in principle at full council in February, which looked at some of the principles of that, and we'd have until late autumn, depending on how you do your calendar, September, October time, before things. You can still make changes after that time, but you have to go through authority. You can't just make the decisions in-house in the normal way. Okay, thank you. Are there any other non-members wanting to ask any questions? If not, I'll go to members. Councillor Williams, or you really ahead? Yeah, okay, no problem. Any other members wishing to ask any questions? I don't know who was first. Councillor Wootton.
Chairman, thank you. It's just in relation to recommendation 3. Got no problem with the recommendation at all, but I'd just be interested to know, because I can identify other titles, but who's our Chief Legal Officer?
Paula Deary. Paula? Yeah. Yes, she's got both. Yeah. I think it's actually the full title includes the legal officer, but it is Paula. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to, on page 244, regarding the community asset transfer of Roref Recreation Ground and Pavilion, I'm a little confused about this, given the fact that the sports pitch strategy is yet to be reported, and yet the council is thinking about seeking to get expressions of interest on just a 15-year leasehold arrangement, because under this item in the report, it's saying that will have to be maintained as sports pitches and other wider community uses. But we know that offering 15-year leases isn't good for organisations such as the FA, etc., to invest in these types of facilities. And I think this is, to me, that this is very restrictive on anyone that on building a sound business case to take over that asset. So that's one of my concerns. Now, one of my other concerns around this, and I have to say, and I'm surprised, and I'm sure you've already seen it, that this area is in a hell of a mess. And hopefully officers will direct someone to go and clear that up tomorrow, because it's
been done today.
Right. So one of the other areas on paragraph 5.7, I am not at all happy, again, about this granted delegated authority to agreeing exact terms. This council has got itself into such a mess in other areas with leases and poorly written leases. And Mr. Brace knows what I'm talking about, and I won't discuss it publicly, but I am not confident that a lease will be drawn up protecting that asset for the community as it should be at this point in time. I don't think we've learnt lessons from the past, so I would like for this item specifically around Rawriff Recreation Ground to be deferred from the agenda tonight, and that decision taken later on once we've looked further into arrangements with leases. And I've raised these questions with the Deputy Chief Executive, which I've yet to receive a response to. So I am deeply concerned. So I don't see that there's any particular rush around this right now. I think we could defer this asset tonight and look to get... Chairman, I don't really want to discuss all the detail, and I've spoken to her earlier. She would prefer me not to discuss the detail of my reasoning, so I will be restrained on that. So that's all I can say about that one.
Okay, so are you moving a motion to defer recommendation?
R4, yes, please.
Do you have a seconder? Okay, Councillor O'Leary seconding that. So we will now talk specifically to deferral. If I can come back on some of the points in the first instance, and then I'll hand over to officers. So first and foremost, 15 years is typically a suitable lease to get funding and grants. 15 years with a 7-year break clause is typically what is required as a minimum. I'm open to longer leases than that, but certainly 15 years is the minimum with a 7-year break clause to get funding from places like the FA, and I've had some conversations with those previously. Personally, I'm not in favour of deferral. We've just spoken to the fact we've got until September to get things done before we have to start asking other people for permission. That's a big old piece of land. I'd have concerns about other councils and what they might want to do with that space, so I don't think we should be deferring personally. We know that there's interest from the communities about taking that space on. You mentioned that the pitch strategy isn't complete, which is correct, but it also says that we know we're going to need to keep those pitches in situ, so we need to keep the volume of pitches there. So I'm quite happy with this coming forward. I see no reason to defer it. I take your point about learning lessons from leases, and I'd have no problem with introducing some extra lining about in consultation with a chair or the committee, so that we've got that oversight of the lease, because they are our assets and they are important within the district. And I've spoken about that myself many times, about I don't like sole responsibility going to officers for things that are less operational and more strategic. So I'd be more than happy with changing the wording around that if officers can support how that would sound. But that would be the reason I couldn't support the amendment. I think, officers, do you want to come back on the points and some of the comments that were made first, and then we'll open it up to any other questions, remembering we're talking just to the amendment?
Yes, I think, Chair. So on the lease term, we would be open to anything over 15 years, as well as as the chair has indicated. On the recreation ground, officers could come back after the EOI process and discuss with members the interest that's been shown, and that will give an opportunity for further discussion around the lease terms. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. There's an issue actually that Councillor Newport has brought up, which has actually been close to my heart with regard to leases and length of lease. I know that that up there that there are those who understand the need for a 25-year lease, which I have found was really important with my declaration of interest, in as much as that we wouldn't be able to get funding if it was not 25 years. And I think that's a problem that I think has come up and been highlighted. And even if I wouldn't want to defer this, but I would like to look at a way in which, how can I put it, a longer lease can be looked at in regards to this, because it is specifically the lease. And I do understand the problems that do come about if the lease isn't long enough for a developer or any developments that are going to go on there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think as Andy set out, the EOI process can bring that conversation back anyway, and that would be part of the negotiation. But I think the point is about it, and then we're going to come on to this later on with the next items as well. Leases of at least 15 years are needed to give anyone any kind of security to either invest in the building themselves or to obtain third-party funding. So I'm quite comfortable with that. But taking on, well, members and officers are taking on board the points made about potential for longer leases, and that would be part of the negotiation, because not every operator might want a 25-year commitment, but some may. Any other members wishing to talk for or against deferring recommendation 4? Oh, sorry, Councillor Linden, you did signal.
Yep, thank you. I'm a little concerned about what Councillor Newport has said, and it's being brushed under the carpet. He said he doesn't want it discussed now, which I respect, but it does concern me that if there is something in there that we do need to know about it if we are voting on this.
It's nothing to do with this particular asset. It's another lease, I think, if I'm right, Councillor Newport, that you're referring to, of a different asset altogether.
Yeah, and basically what I'm questioning is the types of lease that we're handing out and the detail in those leases. And that's the issue here. So that's why I've said that I don't want this delegated purely to officers. I think we need to have further discussion. If you don't want to defer this item, I think we do need to amend R4, because Councillor Ward has clearly said, you know, he's in agreement also that there should be longer leases. I think also that the one thing I will say, and I will add to this debate, is that I don't think officers have spoken to those at parish levels in detail around leases. Now, Roger Taylor, who is the authority on local council administration at Town and Parish Council, he would absolutely tear this council apart for these short-term leases where it involves parish councils. The training that he provides is either freeholds or very long leases. And I wonder if this council has actually spoken to Roger Taylor. He is probably the most experienced person that you could speak to in local government at a town and parish level.
Does anyone want to talk to their relationship with Mr. Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. No relationship with Mr. Taylor, but I'm happy to come in on that. The recommendation R4 doesn't specify lease terms. The whole process under the Community Asset Transfer Policy is to move this asset. We're declaring it that surplus as such to our requirements as a council, and that there is an opportunity for an EOI process, and that we moved into that stage, and therefore proposals can come forward. If then proposals are from parishes or other organisations that require a lease of 25 years or more, they would explicitly state the reasons why, which would be for funding from the likes of Sports England and FA. Regarding working with parishes and other organisations, as you can see from the report, we've had a considerable amount of EOIs come in. It's a work stream in itself for the team. The report obviously sets out about working with national charity Locality, who have worked with organisations and have worked with us on another item on the agenda, who work with all different organisations, including obviously District Council Network as well as the EALC, and they bring in their experience regarding community asset transfer policies and processes. And R6 looks to give the approval that we work with Locality to assist the parish as well as the process around community asset transfers and as other interested groups, so putting on workshops so that anyone interested understands what a lease is, what the requirements are, what a building maintenance requirement is within a lease, what the expectation is on that organisation, what the expectation is on that organisation from the council as well, so that we can be as open and transparent, and then those who are interested have all the information to put in support with DOIs, or they might take the decision to retract their AOIs. Just because we have an AOI doesn't necessarily mean that we will grant all leases. The whole community asset transfer policy, the purpose of it is long leases. That's why ones that have come forward tonight for the Rose Gardens does recommend a lease of 99 years, I think. But take all the points on. No officer here will intentionally put a lease forward that doesn't support organisations, parishes or the council. We're here to deliver what's right for this district. But take the points, but hopefully that gives some support and some clarity around what we're trying to achieve with this.
Thank you. And I'll be honest, I don't love the criticism of officers in that way, especially so generically. But I take on board the point, and I think what the point is more about is that things should be in consultation with as something that we try and consistently do across the council, so that the members have accountability, and if it goes wrong, the members are at fault and not the officers, because we take officers' advice, but ultimately the buck should stop with us as elected members. I think what we need to do is go to the vote on the deferral, see how we go with that, and then we can come back to the substantive. Sorry, Councillor Lindham.
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable with this. Councillor Newport said, if not a deferment, then an amendment. Have you looked at possibly that? Is Councillor Newport going to elaborate on that? Because I am in agreement. If there is concerns, and I've looked at the Section 5, is there concerns about that? We can't just brush it under the carpet. We've got to have either amend or defer. Thank you.
Thank you. So because we've got the amendment on the table to defer, I was going to go to that first. If that's successful, it's deferred. If it isn't, we can come back to the amendment, and I've written down a couple of items within item 5 that I think would cover the point about the minimum lease period and the in consultation with, but it's only right and proper that we deal with the amendment that's on the table first, but then I'm more than happy to come back and we can debate any amendments to the report, and that can be part of, that wouldn't necessarily need a vote on, because we can just agree that if we want to change the wording within the report. So if members are satisfied with that, I think it's right that we go to the vote on the deferral, and then if need be, we come back to debate the rest of the report, including item 5 and any subject amendments. So we've got a proposer and a seconder to defer. All those in favour of deferral? Those against deferral? And any abstentions? One abstention. Okay, so that motion has failed, that amendment has failed. So we're now back to the main report. But for consistency, I think if we just finish talking to this item while we've been on it, so what I would suggest within the report, taking on the points that have been raised, and obviously we can add more to it, point 5.4, where it says on a 15-year leasehold arrangement, I would add the word minimum. So on a 15-year minimum leasehold arrangement, and then the rest stays the same. On item 5.7, where it says granted delegated authority, we add in consultation with the Chairman of Strategy, Policy and Finance. I think that covers the main two issues. Are there any other amendments to Section 5 that people feel are required to satisfy their need? Councillor Newport?
Sorry, Chair. Right, one of the issues that you've just said is in consultation with the Chair. But you and I both know about specifics to do with leases that may not be transferred to a new chair. So whereas I accept what you're saying, I do think there's still that risk there. Do you agree?
I think given the time in the municipal cycle, there is a risk there, so we could bring it back to committee instead if that gives a bit more consistency.
Yeah, if we change that to put back to committee, I'd be a lot more comfortable with that.
Officers, are you happy with that? So essentially, let me just read what that would look like. So it is therefore recommended that expressions of interest are sought for a lease arrangement on Rawrath Recreational Ground and Pavilion brought back to committee. Yeah, future committee. Are members happy with that as an alteration? I don't think we need to vote if we're happy just that it's wording within the report. Okay, fabulous. I'm glad we've got some consensus on that. Okay, back to the wider report. Are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make? We've got 6 recommendations. I know there's quite a lot on there. So any other points? No, in that case, I would like to move the recommendations on page 240. So I'll quickly whiz through them. R1, that the committee considers and approves the outcome of the Stage 2 community asset transfer process as set out in Appendix A of the report. Recommendation 2, that the committee agrees to the recommendations in respect to whether to proceed or not proceed to Stage 3 of the community asset transfer principles and process as set out in Appendix A of the report. Recommendation 3, that the council-owned asset known as the Rose Garden, Southend Road, Rochford, proceed to Stage 5 of the community asset transfer process, allowing a long leasehold arrangement of 99 years to proceed, and that the Director of Assets and Investment, in consultation with the Chief Legal Officer, is granted delegated authority to agree the exact terms for long leasehold arrangement. Recommendation 4, that a process of marketing advertising for further expressions of interest are sought on the council-owned asset known as Rawrath Recreation Ground and Pavilion for the purpose of leasing the asset as set out in the amended version of Section 5 of this report. R5, that the council-owned assets known as Public Toilets, Back Lane, Rochford be declared surplus to the application for community asset transfer can proceed to Stage 3. And Recommendation 6, that the committee considers and approves the proposed action set out in Section 3.8 to 3.10 of the report with the engagement of the organisation locality to assist and support in organising community asset transfer workshops and engaging with parish councils and other interested groups with regards to the council's process of community asset transfer. Are members happy for them on block, or are there any that need to be taken separately? On block? Okay, do I have a seconder for recommendation 1 to 6? Councillor Vilma Wilson. All those members in favour? Any against? And then abstention noted from your conflict. Abstaining, yes. Can we note that for prosperity? Okay, thank you, members. Right, I'm just going to have some water before we go on to item 11. Okay, item number 11, we're getting there. So this is an update on the community governance review. So this is to give an update on the first part of the consultation that has been undertaken in regards to our community governance with the parishes. I will hand over to Greg to provide a bit more of an update and then hand over to members.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The Community Governance Review should be held every 10 years. We've just started our one. It got agreed, the process at committee before Christmas, and we went to the first stage of consultation, which started in November and ended in January. The Community Governance Review offers the opportunity to parish councils and residents to indicate if there's any changes to the governments or arrangements within the parish councils that they have. Fortunately enough, Rochford has a fully parished area, and we went out to residents for that first consultation period, and the report before you is the results of that consultation. That consultation, although the responses were low, around 82, indicates probably because maybe a lot of people are satisfied with what is already going on, but also that there are parished areas. From that consultation, we have created 4 recommendations, 2 of which relate to 2 areas which seek to reduce the number of parish councillors in those wards, and the other 2 seek to align the elections coming forward. Importantly, this is happening just before, we've said, local government review, which will take place in the next few years, so we can get all the parish councils up to the government standards that they want. It was with them deciding what they want and this council agreeing it. So we're going to be looking to go to stage 2 consultation, which will start in May and end towards the end of June, start of July, on those proposals that we have before you. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one point to note as well, and you'll remember those that were present at full council in February when we agreed the structural change order. One of those recommendations that all councils were asked to do across Essex was to agree to align the parish and town council elections with the new unitaries. Rochford's response, if you recall, was in principle subject to this consultation because we didn't want to undermine or preempt the decision of this, but all other councils by one were fully in favour of that. One other said the same as what we did. It's sort of in principle subject to. I will hand over to the floor. Any questions, members? Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Going to the Appendix B, where we're talking about changing the cycle, who is paying for the elections? If for these extra elections, essentially. So, for example, Rayleigh Town Council, Rayleigh Parish Council, Rayleigh Town Council. Yep. They're going to have to hold elections in 28 and in 30, given parish town councils have relatively low budgets, and from experience as a Rayleigh Town Councillor, which I should declare actually, we have to set aside money for that. So is that money expected to be coming out of the parish and town council budgets? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, it would be expected to come out of those budgets moving forward. I think that is part of the consultation and some of the questions that will come out of it when we ask those, that because we're changing that, there will be an extra cost and extra burden on that parish to undertake them.
Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair, and I too will declare an interest as a Rayleigh Town Councillor. Yeah, sorry, could you... Sorry, Greg, can you... Oh. Yeah, sorry, and I probably have missed this, but what is the... I definitely have missed it. What is the rationale behind changing the 2-year terms of office in May... Sorry, let me rephrase that. On Appendix B, page 267, it says about a 2-year term of office from their elections in May 2028 and then back to a 4-year term in May 2030. Now, knowing the significant cost that Rayleigh Town Council has borne through elections, and it was a significant amount, I wouldn't be able to agree to that because ultimately the taxpayer is going to pay that. So can you just explain what the rationale is behind that?
So, Chair, if you indulge me, I was going to come back and you just saw me better try to say something. Coming back on the original question, it is within this council's right. So when the second consultation takes place, and if that is agreed, if there is a package to help assist with those elections, and it's down to this council to decide if they want to help contribute to that, that's down to this council. What I would say, secondly, the reason for looking to align it is actually a financial one, and also to make it more easier for local authorities and the public to understand we're all going out for elections. It will be all on the same date, aligned with the local elections at the same time. So therefore making sense that everyone goes out to election for the 4-year period for a parish council to give it a settled term. That's the process behind it, or thinking.
And if I may just add, because we got some advice on this as well, you can't shorten an elected councillor's term other than when they are elected. So if the intention is by 2030 to have everybody aligned, you could only offer someone in 2028 a 2-year term, and the same for those in 2027, it would be a 3-year term. So once an elected period has been set, you can't shorten it. So that was what we were told. That's why it has to happen. If for any reason it then changed, and we've seen this, elections can be, or terms could be lengthened through different process, but they can't be shortened. But this is the whole point of the consultation, and I would be urging all parishes to respond to the consultation, cost being one of them, because it may be something that this council would then need to take into consideration when making these decisions. My fear is that as part of local government reorganisation, it will be done unto us regardless of what we say, because they've already said they want to align them all. But it's important that we have our opportunity to air the concerns, money being a big one, because we may get a new burden support. I don't know that we would, but it's worth an ask. But ultimately, I think the bigger picture is it would save money, because you wouldn't ever have a period where a parish council was going out for an election when nothing else was happening. So I think that's the overall goal, but it will cost more in the short term to get to the long term. Any other questions? Councillor Linden.
Firstly, I'll follow suit and declare an interest as a Rayleigh Town Councillor. Also, if you can clarify, Greg, what you said, because we have, I know I have asked our clerk to get this point clarified with you in respect to the expenses, any monies or grants that you're willing to pass back our way in respect to this.
So, thank you, Councillor Linden. I can't guarantee or confirm anything because we haven't gone through the second phase of consultation. Once we've gone through the second phase of consultation, which residents and parish councils are allowed to respond to, we'll be able to clarify exactly what the recommendations will be, which go to full council. So they're coming back to here for full council. Part of that may be a financial package, or if they are going to look to recommend to align the elections, there could be a financial package that would support that. Again, it would be down for members to decide on what that would be and how that progresses.
Thank you. I think, again, just for consistency, all members that are, all parish members, there are a few, and town members, there's quite a few in the room. I think it would be worth us just noting that declaration. I can come back to you on who that is, but it's most people in the room are one way or another. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there's just an interesting point that's come up then in regards to trying to harmonise all the elections. That means that if a new authority, which obviously we're looking to harmonise the parish and town council with the new authority, say in 2030, which is what it's saying, I then assume there will be no thirds election. It will be all out for every single election.
That is correct.
Okay, any other members wishing to... Councillor O'Leary?
Yes, sorry, I'm just looking at R3 and coming back to a point you made, Chair, earlier about the municipal cycle that we're in. I am not necessarily comfortable with that being decided in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair of this committee. I feel like that should possibly come back to the full committee once the questions have been decided, just to agree them. I'm not sure if that's the intention of R3 to do that, but that's what I'd like to be clarified.
The intention of R3, which is common because we do prepare the reports, is to prepare the report for the committee. So typically with all reports, Vilma and I of this committee will sit down with the officers. Yep. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, I'm going to move the recommendations on page 255. Recommendation 1, that the responses to the Community Governance Review be noted. I'll take the noted as we go for ease. So is that noted? Recommendation 2, that the draft recommendations as set out in Appendix B be noted and adopted. R3, I'll read R3 and R4 together. So the delegated authority be granted to the Strategic Director in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Strategy, Finance and Policy Committee to draft a suitable set of questions to progress with Stage 2 of the Community Governance Review. And R4, that the consultation starts in May 26 for a minimum of 6 weeks. Are you happy to take those en bloc? All those in favour? Oh, sorry. Seconder? Second. Thank you. And still in favour? Yeah, that was unanimous. Thank you, members. That's fine. Okay. Agenda item 12, the 25-26 Q3 performance. So this is a report just to update on where we are in terms of our corporate plan. And the report set out in Appendix A. I don't know are you speaking to this? Greg? Yeah, Greg, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Evening again, members. Nothing really further to add. It's the Q3 performance. Happy to take any questions on that performance. It's got narrative where there are issues with the performance or it's underperforming, but happy to take any questions, and there are other officers here who can take some of the other questions if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So the report is just for noting, but obviously, as always, if anyone's got any questions or comments they'd like to raise, now is the time to do so. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Just one comment to make on this, and that's on the average customer services phone queue time, which is consistently failing. It's read for 5 consecutive quarters. Although new starters are starting, when can we expect to see, well, more importantly, when can our residents see a material improvement in this? And what's the plan if it remains red at Q4? Because I know that a lot of residents in our district, especially the elderly residents, phone the council and they say to me they can't get through. They get really annoyed about the queue times. And, you know, it's just a basic function of being able to contact the council who they're paying. Thanks.
Can I just quickly come in on that first, Greg, because I spoke to Sam and Shelley this week. So I think it was Councillor Hoy in the last meeting actually made the comment that he thinks possibly our KPI is a bit too ambitious for customer call handling and the time that it takes to answer a call. I think we try to answer it within 60 seconds, which in this day and age is probably a little bit unrealistic. So the KPIs are being looked at, but we're looking at benchmarking before that comes back to this committee to consider, because what I don't want to do is set a KPI that's too easy just to turn something green. It needs to be good customer service, it needs to be realistic, and it needs to be benchmarked against what other councils and public sector are delivering on. So that I just wanted to give a bit of background and context following the last meeting that we had. But did you want to add anything? Because we do need to see that come down where we can.
No, that's absolutely right. I would only say that obviously the last quarter, as in the comments, we did have a campaign going out about the refuse. That increased the number, the volume of calls. And what I would reiterate is there is the option for residents to offer and ask for a callback rather than to wait on the line. However, I know that Sarah Bennett, Stephanie Meek are seeking to drive that down, and they will continue to do that.
Thank you. I think we can all agree we want the best possible customer service for our residents.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on that? Because there's obviously a reason why residents phone up. And are we looking at the root cause of why they're calling? Because I think one of the issues that I find is that the information on the website is really difficult to access. So are we actually going to address the root cause rather than just throw more resource at it, end up in the same situation?
You can come in first.
Yeah, happy to come back. You're quite right, Councillor Newport. We need to make sure the website is up to date, and we're constantly reviewing it. We're constantly working, the customer team are working with our website team to report where issues have happened on the website or where we're getting a high volume of calls saying the information isn't quite right or it's out of date. And we've got the services looking at the websites themselves. If the page is identified as out of date, then we try to move as quickly as possible to update it. But if we don't have an up-to-date website, it generates the calls. And you're quite right. So we're trying to make sure that hand in hand we improve that situation.
And if I may just add to that, something that I've been working on all year and pushing for, and we agreed it in last month's budget again, was that increase in resource in the communications team and the department there, because ideally we don't want everybody having to call in. The information should be easier to find, or it should be readily available. So we've been looking at improving those communications right across the board. We get an awful lot of calls following the council tax letters, people questioning, asking how the council tax works, so those calls go up. Hence trying to provide more information in the letter that they receive, how to access the online account, because an awful lot of people sit for 20 minutes in a queue and they could have accessed it online. Not everybody's capable, so we want those calls to be available for those that don't have the digital platform. So the communications piece has really been invested in for the next year, because I think it's something that this committee and others have consistently said we want to do better with that communication and that learning for residents. So it is noted. We will be looking at the KPIs as a general, but the answer isn't to increase the KPI above the call time, it's to do a mixture of the both, including the alternative communication methods. Any other questions or comments? If not, this report is for noting. Okay, happy to note that? Yep, noted. Thank you. Okay, so we now move on to agenda item 13, which starts on page 325, and it's the Freight House long-term operation. Now, I would just like to remind members that if any member wishes to discuss anything relating to Appendix A for this item, then I'll need to move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that there would likely be a disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So as always, I think we try and speak as much outside of the private as possible to keep members of the public engaged. But if anybody does need to speak to the appendix, we're going to have to remove the public for that time. Does anybody need to speak to the P&C appendix?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just get some clarification? If you could tell me if the report is actually exempt, because I understand that it's been published on the website, so it's been out in the public domain already.
Phoebe, do you want to come in on this? I know you were emailed about this.
Yep, so unfortunately Appendix A had been published, but this was removed and remained exempt, and members were notified of that.
It is out there, but we don't know who's seen it and who hasn't, and it's now been removed, and I would be inclined to not then talk to it because there's some sensitive information relating to organisations in our district. If anybody needs to speak to it, we can obviously go to P&C, but we can try and do the debate without speaking to the appendix and then see if we need to come to it. Councillor O'Leary?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't really see how we talk about this item without talking to the exempt item, to be honest with you. I guess for the benefit of the members of the public that are here, who are concerned about this issue, and I understand that some of them have seen the exempt report already because it was published. But just coming back to come into the report itself, the officer's report, I find it difficult to follow the sequencing of what actually is happening, because there's quite a lot of...
Councillor O'Leary, first of all, I need to determine, are we going to leave the press and public in here and then...
As I said, for the benefit of the people that are here, I'm going to ask a question that's not related to that, but there will be questions coming after. So I can ask that question now.
So we've got two options. We can either remove the press and public now and deal with any of the exempt questions, so we can then bring them back in, or we can do it in reverse and speak to the rest of the debate and then ask them to remove if you need to.
Sorry. So my point is, the question I'm going to ask now isn't related to the exempt item, but it will help me understand the sequencing of what's happening when I come to talk about what is exempt. So that needs to be answered first, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay, so we're happy to speak to the non-exempt part of the report, and then if and when you need to speak to the exempt part, I'll have to close the meeting to press and public. Okay. Councillor Newport signalling to talk. Do you want to let...
Yeah, I do actually, Chair, because it is my understanding that it's up to this committee whether we move to private and confidential, and if we discuss that item in private and confidential or not. Previously, we've been in meetings where we've taken a vote on whether or not we want to discuss that in private and confidential. So that's the third option that you haven't outlined. So, and if it was put to me, given the fact that that paper has been published, I no longer see that paper as being private and confidential or commercially sensitive, whatever you want to say. It's been out in the public domain. Once you put something into the public domain, as we all know, it's in the public domain. You can't remove it. You can't digitally remove it. It's there. So I think that the third option I'd like you to give this committee, or I can move it if you like, that we discuss all of this in open session.
Well, we can go to a vote on that, but I'm not prepared to talk about people's commercial position without their permission. Simple as that. So I'd have to move it to private and confidential, because there's organisations' information within that report that's not ours to share. I profusely apologise that somewhere someone has slipped up and put that on the website and then removed it, but I don't think it's right to publicly broadcast that's out there forever when we're talking about specific organisations, finances, abilities, operators, and so on and so forth. That will come further down the line once we get past this report and we have certain people come back. So whilst I can do the report without talking to the exempt because I've read it and I've had a chance to ask officers questions beforehand, I don't see the need to remove anybody from the room because I think we've already had the information and the report outlines the main facts of what's needed. If you can't get to a decision without talking to the exempt paper, then we will have to ask people, well, I'll have to put it to a vote, but it would be my advice that we stick to the law and we have to remove people from the room, which would be very disappointing. The Local Government Act, it's the lawful requirement that we follow. And I'm happy to put it to a vote, but I've made the position clear that it's not our data to share. We've made a mistake. I've just apologised for it, and I think it would be wrong to debate that information in public. I think that's totally reasonable. I can debate everything within the report without talking to the exempt really easily, and I think many members can, because others would have come forward if they had questions to the exempt, recognising this is an item of public interest. So if you're wanting to talk to the exempt, I will move it to a vote. If you can manage without talking to the exempt, we can get on with the debate and then only go to private and confidential if you come up with something that you can't get over. So I'll leave it with you, Councillor O'Leary, because I think you're the only one wanting to speak to the exempt.
I don't know if I am the only one that wants to speak to the exempt. Okay, but I was the first to speak, so maybe we give others an opportunity. Maybe they prove you right, maybe they prove me wrong. So anyway, coming back to the sequencing, I'd like, if possibly through you, Chair, if the officer could explain the sequencing of what's going to happen, because there's a lot of if, buts and maybes that is difficult to follow. So it would be good to have a simple explanation of what the process and the timeline is.
I'm happy to do it, Phoebe, but you can. He wants to hear from the officer, so you go through.
Thank you, Chair. So previously at the EDR committee, it was recommended that myself go away and explore opportunities of a community-led proposal for the Freight House. We used, as previously mentioned, Locality, a national charity, to support us with looking at the EOIs that we had to date through the community asset transfer policy and looking at what opportunities there were for the Freight House. As you're aware, obviously, the Freight House has allocated funding to it in the new financial year to bring the whole building back into use. Currently, it's only been the main hall that has been operational. In identifying the works that need to bring back into use, we also need a tenant to take on the long-term operation of that building because it cannot be done in-house by the council. Following the work of what Locality done, working with the interested parties through the original EOI process, they have looked at strengths and weaknesses of all them organisations in light of taking on the building, looking looking from a building maintenance perspective, looking from the opportunity of what the community wants from the Freight House. And their recommendations is that there was no one lead organisation, and actually each organisation that expressed an interest all had good strengths, also had weaknesses that not necessarily weakness, but required further development or further work to fully assess kind of their feasibility. Therefore, the report recommends that the council looks to continue to seek a tenant for the building by carrying out an informal tender process. At the same time, the work that Locality done did recognise that in the light of LGR and the community asset transfer process, that there was an opportunity that Rochford Parish Council was a good organisation to hold the building as a custodian organisation. They've obviously established, already have governance, they are a public body. Therefore, the report also looks to seek to undertake work with the Parish Council to look at whether that community asset transfer is possible, but that would come back to committee at a future date to decide. In the meantime, the report seeks to get a tenant into the building for September 2026. What would happen is if the community asset transfer was an option with Rochford Parish Council, it would be expected that they would take on the head lease, and therefore the tenant that the council had sought would then become the tenant of the head lease with Rochford Parish Council. Hopefully that clears up the sequencing, but happy to take further questions.
If I can just add to that, if that's okay, please, Councillor O'Leary. So just for real layman's terms, the idea here and the advice given is through our community asset transfer route, which is a route that we've all agreed to previously, we look at the parish taking on the head lease because they will be here for 100 years. They can take on that head lease, which protects the asset itself against local government reorganisation, because if there's only a 15-year lease, for example, and Rochford were the leaseholder in 15 years, the new authority could decide that would make a lovely riverside development. If the parish have got that lease for 125 years, no one's developing that site, and the site remains a community asset for all of our lifetimes at least, and our children's lifetimes. So the community asset transfer route is the route that was recommended just to safeguard the building through the parish. The tenancy, the operator, that's the piece of work that would come next, and we aren't in a position to determine that yet because, as was outlined, we had some great expressions of interest come forward from some great organisations, all of whom are in the room, who have been able to provide good vision for what that asset can be. But singularly, on their own, the risk for that organisation and the risk for the asset is too great because it's an expensive asset to run. So therefore, no one is being ruled out and no one is being appointed because Locality said there needs to be a further piece of work that could appoint a tenant for, it says in here 5 years, but I think touching on conversations earlier, and we've certainly touched on this with Phoebe, and we've had questions come forward from the public, that would need to be a much longer lease. Again, consistency, minimum of 15 years would be the terminology that we use. But the idea here is not just about appointing someone to get an appointment through, it's about getting the right people in the room, whether that be as a consortium, whether that be as a sole body, is to be determined, and Locality want to keep working with those interested parties, if they are still interested, to get to an outcome that they are comfortable with, that the council is comfortable with, and that the community is comfortable with. So that is the process that we're going through. It would have been fantastic to come here tonight to be able to be in a position to appoint a lease, but it would have been irresponsible because the risk we would be placing on an individual organisation, Locality have informed us is too high. And I think given the amount of money we're investing into the Freight House, given the community interest in the Freight House, it would be wrong to take a decision that we don't feel is fully right for the asset and the community groups that we value. So I know I've probably just said what Phoebe said, but I'm just trying to speak in sort of public terms as well. Right, I'm going to ask Councillor O'Leary, do you need us to come back to you at this point, or I've got a few other hands in the room if not?
No, I can come back.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Steptoe, our visiting member, because he was signalling, then I'll come back to members.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to see this coming forward this evening. It's been a long time coming. Securing the asset of the Freight House has been a great concern to the ward councillors and the public in and around Rochford town itself. So I'm very, very pleased to see this is coming forward. A lot of what you said, Chairman, you've stolen a lot of my thunder, so I won't repeat it. But I do feel that it does need to go to an organisation such as the Parish Council going forward to secure that lease for certainly my grandchildren and perhaps hopefully their grandchildren as well. It is an asset. It is very, very important to the people of Rochford. It needs to have community use. There's lots of parts of it that can be used for other bits and pieces and different things, but it needs to be community orientated. And I think that's the one important thing that the parish itself can give it. The one thing I would ask the committee to consider is going forward as discussions evolve. I don't want to use the word to be consulted, that's not quite what I mean, is that the ward councillors can have an input as to how this goes forward and to be working with officers in securing this for the asset for Rochford town itself and beyond. You touched on the point about the LGR. The LGR is going to be a big issue in it, and as you've already said, it would be a prime development site for another council coming forward that let's say is not quite as friendly to Rochford town as we will be. It is something that greatly concerns certainly me, and I'm sure I can speak for the other ward councillors and certainly for many of the people that live in Rochford. So thank you, Chairman, but I would ask if you could consider that the ward councillors have a greater involvement in it going forward once we start securing the asset. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Ward, I believe.
Thank you. Councillor Steptoe has actually said a lot of what I was going to say, actually, again. I think it is important to have an overarching body that actually protects it. And again, the concept of joint ventures or anything like this with any other interested commercial group that wish to use it, I think that's important. But the most important factor is in regards to LGR and what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. It needs to be protected, and an overarching body such as Rochford Parish Council is the ideal solution, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other members wish to be? Councillor Goodham.
Yeah, there's just a couple of small points that I've got concerns with, and the lift is one problem. Is the council looking to deal with that problem, because it can't be open to everybody, as was stated by the officer, if the lift isn't working because it doesn't allow accessibility. And the other thing is, I'm concerned about how Rochford Parish Council will manage to fund the head lease if they do go ahead with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first point about the lift, this is something that's been raised a few times. I think officers recommended that as part of the next stage and those conversations and understanding how that building will be used and who the operator is and what need and what type of lift is needed. I think it's absolutely something that will need to be funded. And as a council, whilst it's not in the direct budget, we do have some allocated funds for Rochford Town Centre specifically, which could potentially come into covering Freight House, but also we've got reserves that we could look at, and this council could make that decision at the appropriate time once we know how that space is going to be used. In regards to your other point, sorry, what was just remind me of the second part of that question? Oh, about the parish council and how they would fund the head lease. So just for clarity, the lease, they would become the custodian of the building. There would then be a tenant in there which would have a contract, and the running cost of that would be negotiated with that tenant for the period of, I believe we should change the wording, 15 years, or as negotiated with the tenant or occupier, whatever the correct word is. because different people will have different requirements. But essentially, this is why it's so important to get the right operator, because they need to be able to have those ongoing costs. I also think part of the next stage of the communications, and Phoebe will probably roll her eyes me saying this, is the car park needs to be looked at. Does that come into it? Is that part of the wider package? But that is things that do need to be considered as the bigger picture, but we aren't there yet because we don't know who the operator is. But in the short term, we've got an opportunity tonight to ensure that we can move the process to securing the asset against LGR, essentially, which is what we're trying to achieve here through the parish council. And then we have a period of about 6 months to find and agree an operating tenant or tenants for that space. So that is the objective, if I'm not mistaken. I've got Councillor Williams and Councillor Linden, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If you have a crystal ball, I'd like to borrow it. I think it's most important. I won't be voting on this item because of my relationship with the parish council. It's really important that we protect our assets for the future. So I would urge members to look upon this as a positive move rather than just getting rid of a building that we no longer need. But yes, I think it would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Linden.
Yeah, we do need to secure our assets, and all parish and town councils are working hard at the moment to understand the financial implications and the way forward. I'm trolling through the report again. Once this lease has been transferred to the new leaseholder, in this instance potentially Rochford Parish Council, does that mean that we relinquish any responsibility for who is actually going to be operating the building, or are we still going to have a say in who actually goes in there?
Thank you. This council will be choosing who goes in there through the expression of interest process. So the parish become the custodian, but they don't decide who goes in there. This council, because we're the ones that have done all the legwork, all the consultation, engage locality. So this council, when I say this council, Rochford District Council, whoever those members are in the new municipal year, will make that decision as to who the operator is via our officers and in consultation as set out. The parish will have a seat at the table, but they won't be a decision maker. The process is we would obviously consult with them as to the decisions that we're looking to take, but they wouldn't be the decision maker on that first lease. Once that first lease is up, and as the head lease, they would then basically they would look at what comes next. So that's why if we sort of lease out for 15 years of an operator, it would then be down to the parish to negotiate with either that operator or another as to the next term. So it's about giving it that future-proof process.
Yeah, thank you for that. So effectively they will have a lease on the building but won't have any say on the initial operator or operation on that. Which leads me to the second question, which the car park. So obviously, if they've got the lease of the building, will they have access rights to come over the car park to actually get in the building? Because that is one way of controlling what goes on going forward.
Yeah, so when I'm talking about the car park, I'm talking about the operating income from the car park to help offset the costs. So that might be something that's negotiated further down the line. It's something that would need to be looked at as a business case in its entirety. In some parts of the country that has happened. In other parts it's deemed not appropriate, but it needs to be considered. It needs to be a considered decision at the appropriate time, which would be between essentially May and September. The parish won't have a say on the tenant, but they will have a voice. So if they had strong objections for one reason or another, that would be listened to and factored in. But ultimately, it would be a tender process with appropriate scoring, everything weighted so that it's completely transparent. But locality, as experts in this field, would work with any interested parties to build something to secure not only the future of the asset, but also the organisation. Because the last thing we want to do is put a weight around an organisation's neck that they then realise they can't sustain, and then either the building gets mothballed or the association or the group or the commercial operation or whatever it is financially struggles or goes bankrupt or whatever the relevant case may be. So it's about working in tandem for both building and tenant. That's fine.
Thank you for all that information. may I just on this occasion offer our thanks up to the design cabin for taking on the building, and while we've been deliberating and deciding what we're doing going forward, that at least they were able to keep it open and keep it warm going forward. So I'd like to thank them for that.
Absolutely, that will be minuted, and I think many of us will share that thanks. I think we've all probably, everyone in this room has attended one event or another at least since the design cabin took the licence on and showed us just what is available and what is deliverable within that main hall space as a starter for 10. So absolutely, our thanks to James and his team. Councillor Eaves and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up from your last comments there, we are talking about the lease for the building, but you're saying that there's a possibility of whoever gets it is going to be taking the income from the car park. So just for clarity, can you tell us if we are actually looking at the lease being the building and the car park, or just the building? Because it's a little bit confusing if we're then going to be looking at later on, including the car park.
At this moment in time, it's just the building, but we need to keep an open mind as to what that looks like through that EOI process, because already those questions are being asked by interested parties, because it could help with the sustainability, and it's something that a lot of other councils across the country have done as part of that LGR package. I don't know if it's right or not for the Freight House, or if it's right or wrong for the new unitary council, and we don't yet know what that new unitary is, but I'm putting it out there that it's something that can be considered. It's within our gift to consider it, but we've got the car parking strategy being worked on, and this is why I knew Phoebe would be rolling her eyes at that end of the table. We have got the car parking strategy being worked on. It is a step ahead, but it is things that, as an open mind and as councillors, you can be considering, and locality can be having those conversations. But right now, it is very much about the community asset transfer to the parish to safeguard the asset, and then agreeing to proceeding with the next step, working with locality, the current people that have expressed an interest, and if any others come forward, but looking at what that looks like, how we can support those groups, because I think we recognise there's a lot of strengths there that deliver exactly what the community asked us for through the previous consultation that happened. So yeah, I probably threw a spanner out there by mentioning the car park, but a lot of people have mentioned it to me, and I think it's only right to acknowledge that. You wanted to come back, Councillor Eaves?
So if I can just clarify then, if we do go ahead in the future of including the car park, would that be as a tag-on to the lease to Rochford District Council, or would that be something that we would still keep control of and just hand the funds to whoever is actually going to be running it?
That would be part of the consideration, the strategy and the business case as to what that looks like. Does it go to the parish? That we know, for example, other parishes have ownership of some of the car parks in the district, but they don't necessarily charge. It could be part of a business case for a tenant for a period of time. There's a whole piece of work that would need to be done. So I wouldn't get bogged down too much in the car park, but just keep it in the mind's eye for next year that it may be something that wants to be considered, because it may make that asset much more viable for an organisation that take it on. The new unitary might not be quite so happy about it because they'll want the income for themselves, but we need to look at the bigger picture and what's most important for certain assets within our district. That's right now, at this moment in time, we only represent Rochford District, so I think that's where we should be focusing our attention. I've got Councillor Ward, then Councillor Gooding.
Thank you, Chairman. So the lease from us to the parish would be 100+ years or something. Is that what is being considered? 125, something like that?
It could be up to 125 years. It'd be subject to the full kind of business case and the EOI coming back from the parish council.
If I may carry on then, just clarifying that point. The ownership, the freehold, coming to that bit now, which is then impacts LGR, the freehold will pass to the new authority. What protection will there be for that asset when that lease runs out?
Yeah. So with that, in 125 years, the councillors of that time, maybe robots, who knows, maybe just AI, they will have to make that decision. We can only do what's in our gift right now, and I think the community would be satisfied with 125 years worth of protection right now. And if we've shown over those decades that it's a viable and a vibrant and such an important part of Rochford Town as we all believe it is, then I'd hope that whoever's in charge in that time would be thinking along the same way. If the Freight House is still standing, which I'm sure it would be, I'm sure it's got 125 years in it.
Chairman, just to interrupt you there, the Barley Parish Council has a lease with Rochford District Council for 199 years, and I have every intention of being there when they renegotiate.
It was just a case, if I may, Chairman, it's just a case of seeking that protection, because 125 years will run down, and then all of a sudden they're going to be faced with something. And we say, will the Freight House be there? But the land will be there, and that land will be extremely valuable. And people may want to retain that generation, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren may want to retain that Freight House, but it may not be possible because the freeholder will say, I'm sorry, I do not wish this to continue. I'm selling this off for another purpose, and that's the end of it. So there has to be something that has to be in there to protect it. You know, if I may just carry on, the woodlands at Rochford, we've got Wyburns Wood. That's 999-year lease we've got on that.
Yeah, I think that's not from Rochford District Council, is it? I thought that was from the National...
Woodlands Trust, it was Woodlands Trust literally passed that on to Railay Town Council for 999 years.
Which is not in our gift as Rochford District Council at this time. We've got the community asset transfer strategy and policy that we've agreed to, so we have to stick within that. We can't go past the 125 years at this stage. What I would say is every councillor for every cycle over the next unitary, and there could be 2 lots of LGR in 125 years based on the generational shift that it does, keep making the same case for the Freight House. But right now, I think we're doing a good job to try and secure it, invest in it, improve it, and make sure that the community have access to it for a whole plethora of activity. Councillor Gooding.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I do have a question that is in the exempt, so I'd like to ask that.
In that case, I am sorry, I'm going to have to just move a motion to vote on excluding press and public. You're welcome to wait behind the door and we'll whisper and then you can come back in. But we do need to for completeness of the debate. So I'm sorry, but we need to do things properly. So I will just move a vote first before you all scupper out, just so that I've done that correctly. Where's the wording? Right. So... Okay, so I'm just going to move a vote. I would like to now close the meeting to the press and public and move into a private session. All those in favour? Okay, so that is passed. I don't believe that we'll be in private for long, so you are welcome just to hang tight and then come back in. It's completely up to you. I'll give it a moment while you vacate. Okay, thank you. Thank you, members, and thank you, members of the public, for bearing with us. I am just going to say it's nearly 10 o'clock, so I'm going to move a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes. I have no intention of using the full 30 minutes, but I just, for prosperity, and we need to, this is the last meeting of the municipal year and the final item needs to be done. So to avoid an alternative meeting, I'm going to move a motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Okay, do I need to do those against when it's one of these? Those against? Any abstentions? Okay, no problem. Thank you, members. I'll be as quick as I possibly can. So we're back to the main report. I don't think there could possibly be anything else to discuss, but just before I move the recommendations, does anyone have anything else to say on the report? No? Great. Councillor Newport.
Okay, sorry, Chairman. So one last thing, and I just want to ask, why, if we're so confident about saving this, or not saving, but transferring this asset, why aren't we considering the freehold? Because I see that as, if, let's take, for example, that was going to the parish council, I see by actually transferring the freehold more security for the parish council, because over that course of that time, if things go belly up, they can, at least they've got an asset, but all they've got is a lease in their hand. And I think that that would protect not only the asset, but the residents that we serve.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that as a concept, but at the moment our community assets transfer route is about leasing, it's not about transferring. So there's nothing to stop further conversations happening. But right now we only have the option to move via the route that we've debated and that is set out. So it's my ask, and I'm going to move the recommendations in about 30 seconds, but that is the reason, and I don't think it should be off the table, but it's not within this current council strategy, therefore it's not for debate this evening. So, Councillor O'Leary, very quickly please.
Sorry, it is actually to do with the recommendation. R4, again, I'm not clear from the recommendation if the way it's written, the chairman, the director of assets and the chairman are concluding the lease. Does that mean that they're deciding the terms of the lease and that's not coming back to the committee? Yeah, sorry, there's two R4s, yeah. The second R4, R5, yeah.
So that isn't proposed to come back to committee because that's the expression of interest, and that would be on a tender scoring process as with all of our expressions of interest. I've got no problem if you want to amend it to have one final debate on it at an appropriate time, if members are minded to do that.
Yes, please.
So that's an amendment. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Newport. So members, to be clear, without going to full debate, what Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Newport are asking is recommendation 4.4, so should be labelled as recommendation R5. At the moment it reads, the committee delegates authority to the Director of Asset and Investment in consultation with the chairman of this committee to conclude the necessary lease agreement with a preferred tenant following scoring of the informal tender submissions against the set criteria outlined in Appendix B. We're going to ask that before that decision is ratified, it comes to this committee to debate. All those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. So officers, if we just note that, but obviously timing is going to be everything on this, so we need to just make sure that that can factor in. And I would like to say for the next municipal year, that may mean a specific meeting of this committee because of the timings that are going to be nuanced. Councillor Wootton.
Chairman, thank you for clarity, and you inserted the words. I do think that you need actually to have chairman of this committee. I think that needs to go in there.
I'm going to read the recommendations as set out on page 326. Okay. Recommendation 1, that the committee note the findings of the external report produced by locality in Appendix A. Is that noted, members? Recommendation 2, I'm going to read all the rest of the recommendations together and then take them on block if that's allowed, or I'll ask about separate. R2, the committee agrees that the council will explore a community asset transfer route with Rochford Parish Council identified as a potential stable asset holding body for the Freight House building as per site plan in Appendix C. Recommendation 3, the committee approves that the council undertakes a targeted informal tender process to identify prospective tenants for Freight House from September 26, as outlined with this report and Appendix B. Seeking a prospective tenant will run alongside the work stream identified in R2 above. R4, that the council contracts locality to support and deliver the tenant and community asset transfer process as outlined within this report, and that the final recommendations for community asset transfer will be brought back to a future committee for approval. And R5, that the committee delegates authority to the Director of Assets and Investments in consultation with the Chairman of Strategy, Policy and Finance to conclude the necessary lease agreements with a preferred tenant following the informal tender submissions against the set criteria outlined in Appendix B, following a report to this committee. Are we happy to take those on block, members? R2 to R5? Yes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vilma. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions for your conflict? Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Thank you, members of the public, for bearing with us. And we will now move on to item 14, which is the work plan. If anybody wants to leave, you are absolutely welcome. I just ask you to do it as quietly as possible because I recognise it's almost 10 o'clock. Thank you. So, agenda item 14, the committee work programme. So this is just for noting, members. Does anybody, bearing in mind we're at the end of the municipal year, and the meeting dates haven't been set, so it's a bit of a funny one, but I think we need to add some points on here based on what we've spoken about tonight. The community asset transfer needs to be on here because that decision needs to come back before September, and the report on a preferred tenant needs to come back before September. So are we happy to add those once dates are set by the new council? But I think it's good to give that steer so that there's that commitment. And also some of the standing ones that we asked to, yes, yeah. So the things that we've debated tonight, essentially, so the community asset transfer, the tenants, we asked for the leisure centre to come back to this report for updating, just to show us the progress on that, and the standing ones that we have with the community asset transfers, like the standard report. Is there anything else that we think we need to put on there just to give the new council and the new committee a steer? I think we've covered most of the things, and it will be for a new council to determine. But anything else, or are we happy to note that subject to those things we've just added? Noted? Fabulous. Now, I'm very sorry to the members of the public, but we do have one final item, which is the business rates write-off, and it is exempt. I do have to move to remove people, press and public. Do I have a seconder? Yeah, thank you. All those in favour of moving into P&C for the final item? Yeah, that's carried. Okay, so I'll just give a moment for people to leave and to turn off the live stream, and this is a very quick item.